The rotting bowels of the Great Unclean One swell with pus and contagion, and within each swelling there grows a tiny and malevolent demon called a Nurgling. Physically, Nurglings are miniature versions of Nurgle himself, with friendly, mischievous faces, tiny, bloated green bodies, and limbs that are often distorted or disproportionate. Normally they swarm over the body of a Great Unclean One, picking at his skin, squealing with pleasure if their master favours them with a tidbit or a caress, otherwise squabbling over the most comfortable recesses of his carcass. When faced with an enemy, they advance in a furious swarm, clawing and gnawing at the foe's legs, biting his ankles, and licking at any interesting sores and abrasions they discover. Their tiny teeth are as sharp as razors, leaving festering little bites upon their victims, but rarely killing them outright, although such an attack can prove to be the beginning of a long, disease-ridden demise, as something as nasty takes root in the wound. So that's pretty much all the information regarding Nurglings. This was their introduction in the Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition army book for the Demons of Chaos. And before anything, there's a few things that we do need to discuss, as obviously this trailer has shown off quite a bit. Obviously, there are a lot of different animations. It looks like Nurglings are going to be extremely varied when it comes to battle animations. We can see them just flat out attacking, sticking themselves on an enemy, and a bunch of them rolling up together as a ball, or even acting like a kind of construct in a sense. It's pretty cool. I must admit that that's kind of how everyone imagined Nurglings to pretty much be. I wonder how useful they're going to be on the battlefield, especially as I'm assuming they're going to be in a similar sense to that of the tabletop version. So Nurglings on the tabletop were their own classification of things. Very few units were classified as swarms, and swarm units essentially were unbreakable, which we already know that demons are going to be unbreakable anyway, but they were essentially tar pits. They were very strong tar pits. So you could use them to hold down some enemy units for a turn or two, sometimes even longer if you were lucky, or use them to go and pin down, say for example, an artillery piece. But they didn't really have a lot of uses barring that. Now, obviously, since we've seen some interesting animations and so on, I'm imagining that they're going to be a tad stronger, especially as we are aware that Korgoth does buff up the Nurglings, so maybe just for Korgoth's faction they'll be stronger? We're going to have to wait and see, but I am kind of curious, as they're very small, and if the fact is that they're adding in the Nurglings, that hopefully means that we'll get giant rats in the future for the Skaven. But that's not all for this video. As you can see, we were also given the first look towards the, well, what can be assumed to be the Cultist of Slaanesh, and she looks interesting. It looks like she's an elf. This is pretty cool. Right, for context, the reason why this is cool is they kind of did away with the Elven Slaaneshi worship around 7th edition, which is why the Cult of Excess and the Cult of Pleasure and so on were actually changed around to worship different elven gods rather than Slaanesh. So this is quite interesting, especially since we are aware that Games Workshop need to okay this, so perhaps they're changing around the lore for Old World, maybe bringing the Cult of Pleasure back? But let's not talk about Old World just yet. Let's just keep focusing on, obviously, Warhammer 3. She looks cool, and she's got additional hand weapons, so she's going to be a melee hero. I wonder if she's got anything special about her, because we know that all the other cultists do have something special. I unfortunately can't think of anything at the moment, but to be fair, we've only just had a few frames to look at her, and I'm assuming that we'll get the roster reveal eventually. But with all that being said, apologies for the short video today. I'm dealing with wisdom teeth pains, and yeah, not fun. Not fun whatsoever. I'll be back tomorrow though with another Warhammer style video anyway.